Attention, because we are at a historic moment, we are going to present you with an exclusive scoop. And that's because we have here the first bicycle developed and created around 32-inch wheels. The first mountain bike designed for competition with 32-inch wheels. Who's responsible for this? BMC with their Impact Lab Development Division, who have set their sights on this. To understand if 32-inch wheels could be better for the world of cross-country mountain bike racing than the current 29s. But see, this is a video where I have to warn you about a lot of things because it's a very different video. It's a video that will probably leave us with more questions than answers. Even the engineers behind this project themselves, whom I've had the pleasure of talking with, they themselves have told me that right now they have more questions than answers. And that this machine precisely has to be the starting point to begin gathering information to solve those doubts. The first thing I have to tell you, let's make a little disclaimer here, is that this is really the very first prototype of all. Don't expect in a few months, not even in a year, a new bike, a new 4-stroke, or a new double suspension BMC for cross-country. The current one, the 29-inch one, is the one in use, and it's going to be on the market for a long time. This isn't about to happen. In fact, we're presenting it today. It's very, very rare in the industry because prototypes or finished bikes usually aren't shown or presented until they're very close to the sales phase. Basically, because what brands try to do is avoid devaluing the current model. Because if soon you're launching something to the market, well, this situation could happen, right? This situation is very different. BMC is a brand that's governed or guided much more by the engineering side than by the marketing side. Engineers have a lot of freedom to develop and test things. In fact, they're always ahead in every field, in aerodynamics, with triathlon bikes on the road, with lightness. In the world of mountain biking, we've seen it countless times with the APS suspension system with double linkage, with the auto drop, which is really the only brand that has it, a dropper post that lowers by itself just by pressing the button without needing to put our weight on it. It's a brand that's recognized, BMC, precisely for innovating, and staying ahead. And here, what they want is to make a statement and say, gentlemen, we're already testing it, we're already trying to understand. What could the behavior of a 32-inch bicycle be like on a World Cup mountain bike circuit? Because the idea is for this bicycle to be tested on the Andorra circuit, since we're right here at the World Cup. Another disclaimer I have to give you is that this is a completely separate project from the competition team. The riders didn't ask for this. This is something that comes from within the BMC bicycle brand, and as I said, it's completely separate. Another thing, we're not going to focus on components. Sorry for so many disclaimers, but I'm telling you, this is a very different video and I have to be very careful with my words and what I say. We're not going to focus on components and so on, because in this race towards 32 inches, there are actually very few component brands that already have some of their materials adapted. In fact, we are going to analyze a bit later on some of the adaptations that engineers have had to make to actually make a frame viable with these really big wheels, 32 inches. But as I was saying, the message that they want to send here is mainly about innovation. It's mainly about letting our engineers, who are real experts at MC, do their thing. Let them play, let them innovate, and let them be the first in this possible race for the world of 32-inch bikes, which today no one knows if these kinds of bikes will be faster than the current ones. And this, the fact that they might be the fastest. If it finally ends up being proven that this is the case, it would be what justifies all this development and this whole change to these 32-inch bikes, right? Well, let's take a look at what we have here, because I need to talk to you about what I see. There really isn't any data. It hasn't given me anything yet in terms of geometry, nothing about travel, suspension, nothing about kinematics. Everything remains in a very early stage. That they're still playing with a lot of parameters, and what I can talk to you about is what we have right here in front of us. As you can see, it's 100% a very noticeable prototype, because we can see sections of the frame in carbon. Specifically, there are some carbon sections that are very recognizable, like the triangle, or a large part of the rear triangle, which, as you can see, is exactly the same as the current four-stroke and also uses the APS system with a dual linkage. There are other parts of the frame that maybe required a more specific adaptation, and they are made with computer numerical control aluminum. Why? Well, basically because when they're developing with a prototype, what they need is the maximum agility possible. When it's time to change the size of a part or modify the shape of one of the pieces or whatever, it's much faster to make a part with computer numerical control. First prototypes are often made entirely of aluminum. After approval, they move on to carbon. Here we have an intermediate point. Why is there an intermediate point? Well, according to what the engineers have been explaining to us, for them, it's very important to try to make sure that the bike, even though it has to change a lot because it's switching to another one, the wheel diameter is 3 inches bigger, but they want it to be as similar as possible to the current four-stroke. Because this way, they can really make sure that the only change in the bike is the size of the wheels. And with that, they can understand if this bike will have better maneuverability, better acceleration, and better speed maintenance. On flat terrain, better obstacle navigation was crucial, so keeping the same suspension system was essential, and certain areas as similar as possible. To the current four-stroke, even the auto drop, which as you can see we also have here. What happens? Well, obviously it starts from the base of the current four-stroke. However, some parts of the bike need adaptation. We can see how they've extended the dropouts at the end. The rear axle of a 29 would end up around here. They probably already had to extend the dropouts up to here with this aluminum computer numerical control to accommodate these 39s. If we look at the fork, it's a standard fork, 100% like the ones we can find now for 29s. They've tried to extend this segment here as well with some machining to try to make room for the front wheel. Well, honestly, it's really interesting. If you look closely, the shock absorber coupling is very different. The whole shock absorber mount, we can even see here a super negative stem also made with this aluminum. And well, one of the things that needs to be checked with this new type of wheels is the suspension travel. Because if we remember this is something I'm saying. The engineers haven't told me this, but if we remember when we went from 26 to 29, well, at first it was said that since the wheel was bigger, maybe so much suspension travel wasn't needed. Over time, the 29s came with 110 or even 120 millimeters of travel. Now, at this first step, from 29 to 32 inches, they have to measure whether the bike will perform better with 100 millimeters of travel, with 110, or with 120. It's not known. I asked these things, and they still can't answer them for me. Because this is the type of prototype, the type of unit they're going to start collecting data with to understand all of this. What else can I tell you? You can perhaps notice some of the challenges that the engineers of this brand will have to face in order to adapt the models of this brand. And of all the ones you can research in this field of 32 inches, right? You can observe some compromises. The first of all has to do with the painting. That's the impression it gives. They also haven't told me exactly what size this bike would be or what size. This bike would be equivalent to a real 29R, likely between a medium and large size. And the first thing you can notice is that the frame gives the impression of being compressed. And if you want to maintain the sloping, well, everything feels very compressed. I insist this is not a final product. They're focused on validating and collecting data to determine the project's viability. Don't seek limitations like only one bottle rack fits there. That will come much later in the process. We're not used to seeing bicycle development processes at such an early stage. Okay, please, all these kinds of specific questions about the bicycle, the answers aren't available yet, not from you, me, or the engineers, so don't worry about it for now. And the second commitment, which gives the feeling that we're going to have the engineers, not us, will have to fight for that. It has to do with the high position of the steering tube, because in the end, if we had 120 millimeters of travel up front with 3 more inches of wheel, the biker could end up really high. And the way to neutralize that would be, as you can see, with a super negative stem. However, this can simultaneously trigger other behaviors in downhill sections, etc. It's too soon to say, but those are at least 2 compromises that I see that could happen here. As I mentioned in the video where I talked about the 32-inch bikes, I said that I hope they would eventually make their way into the circuits. About the World Cup in a year or two, as you can see, things are moving much faster than we all expected. The thing here is that even though we can anticipate some downsides, as I already mentioned, like logistics, bike storage capacity, bike transportation, and so on and so forth, the premise will always be the same if they put this in the World Cup circuit. And is it faster than what we have now? Or will the successive evolutions of these prototypes end up being faster than the current ones? This will end up prevailing, because in the end we all want to go faster, especially those who are competing for the rainbow jersey, the World Cups and all that. And in a brand that is 100% focused on performance, like BMC, I think that will be the most important argument. The rest of the adaptations, where do you carry the water bottle? How much travel? All of that? I'm convinced that you'll find it in the right place for each of those things. But the most important thing to validate is to know if this 32-inch machine is faster than the current one. And for that, they have created this unit. I can't tell you much more. I don't have any more information. It will be fascinating to see how this process progresses. And for now, the only thing I can say is that BMC has made a bold move, showing that they're already working on it. Let's see how this topic keeps evolving. Please let me know in the comments, what is your opinion about it? As I said, don't get too worked up about the questions that haven't been answered yet. I have them too, but I'm very interested in knowing your opinion. After seeing in proportion this first mountain bike for competition, created around 32 inches. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with what's going to happen, and share the video with your biker friends. Be very happy. Bye.